So everybody please join me in welcoming Burt.
Hi, thanks so much for having me here today. So, yeah, I thought I'd just talk a little bit about Storify and kind of give a tour of some of the lessons we've learned from what we've been doing. So, pardon me? Oh, I thought I just heard something. So this is, what I was doing before I was doing an internet startup. I was not every day touring around with missiles, but I was a correspondent and bureau chief for the Associated Press. And this is from 2003 during the Iraq War when I was embedded with the U.S. Marine group. Yeah, and this is a missile under some stadium in the middle of Iraq, in the middle of nowhere. So you know, I spent a long time reporting from all these places. I was in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, North Korea, South Korea, the former Soviet Union, and through all this, you know, kind of thinking about, you know, being on the ground, reporting on what was happening, but really seeing things changing. Obviously, changing a lot through social media, changing a lot through the web, which is a totally different medium than we've ever seen before. I mean, this is a picture from actually Coit Tower here in San Francisco. They have these all nice murals painted on the inside. It's a great place to go and see, you know, the old printing presses, the San Francisco Chronicle. I mean, this is broadcast medium, and I talk about broadcast medium to really mean paper too. I mean, a one-way medium that is not social, which, you know, now through the internet, I really believe that, you know, social media is not just your Twitter account, your Facebook page, your LinkedIn profile. The web itself is inherently a social media, and you really have to take that into account into everything you do, and that changes the way you think about things. I'm sure many of you saw this picture and remember what this is about. This is, you know, the plane that landed in the Hudson in New York, a photo that was sent on Twitter, and kind of underscoring the point. You know, this, no journalist could have been sitting there waiting for a plane to drop into the river in front of them, right? But there were people on the ferry that went out to rescue the plane and took this photo, which was actually picked up by, you know, news organizations around the world, including the AP, and distributed. You know, now we have this amazing potential not only to make storytelling social, but also to incorporate social media into our stories, because there's this amazing source of content, because there's so much out there that we could potentially use. So how do we make storytelling social? That's one of the big ideas behind Storify, and how do we foster audience engagement, which is what this panel title is. And so I was just going to talk about Storify and things that we've learned, and kind of grouping that into four big topics: curation, feedback loops, making things embeddable, and making stories dynamic. So curation, you know, a big theme that we hear about, and I thought the best way to really illustrate this would be to show examples of, you know, things we pulled out, that our users pulled out from the social media flood. I mean, Twitter recently said that they have 1 billion tweets sent every 3 days, and that was just, you know, a few weeks ago. The pace is picking up faster than that. YouTube, as you know, gets 36 hours, I think, of video uploaded per minute. Again, it's probably increased since I heard that stat, you know, just a couple months ago. So there's so much media out there. Most of it is irrelevant. Most of it is people talking, you know, about what they had for lunch. But occasionally there's amazing things in there. So this was from last year. Go away helicopter before I take out my giant swatter. You know, this guy tweeted in the middle of Pakistan, in the middle of nowhere. What was that? And, you know, it turned out he was there live tweeting the raid that resulted in Osama bin Laden's death. You know, there happened to be a guy there. He's heard all these explosions and noise. There's actually a whole series of live tweets where he was essentially reporting on this event without knowing what was happening. And, you know, after, you know, we heard what happened, I mean, and in the story about bin Laden, which actually broke also on Twitter, you know, people kind of discovered him, and this was one of our most quoted tweets in stories of the year, because it was just kind of amazing, the fact that he was there, and again, underscoring the fact that there will always be somebody, you know, there reporting on things, even in the middle of nowhere in Pakistan where Osama bin Laden was hiding out. This is another, you know, photo from Joplin, Missouri last year when the tornadoes hit there, and you know, it's an interesting photo. It could have been taken by any journalist, but this was actually curated into a story that the Washington Post did on the disaster there, and it was attached to this tweet by a person who says, "This is where I got married, and my best friend's kid went to school." So really, I mean, it's not just the photo of the church. Now, by taking this from a regular person who was there, who posted this photo, it adds more context and meaning to it. And I think it's kind of a real emotional way that you can bring in what people have said on the ground, but you know, connect with the audience actually it's a much more meaningful way. Just another obviously huge story was Steve Jobs dying, and the Daily Beast put together this great story where they found all the Apple employees on social media and how they were reacting to this happening. You know, and they were able to pull this together very quickly. It would be, you know, Apple is not the most open place. You can't go walking into people's offices and ask them how they feel, obviously, but through social media they were able to put together this great reaction story using Storify. And you know, another story recently, Facebook buying Instagram, which Kara talked about earlier today. You know, giving 1% of your market cap to take out biggest threat is a savvy move. So this was a reaction from Chris Dixon. He's a noted angel investor and entrepreneur. And The Guardian put this into a story. You know, there was a lot of reaction. What do people think? Is this a good or bad thing? That was kind of, you know, one thing. But, you know, also people were saying funny things about this whole thing. Facebook buys Instagram for 1 billion. Idiots, they could have downloaded it for free. So, like, this was another story, another tweet that somebody found and put into a story. And, yeah, so kind of, you know, there's obviously lots of funny things online, too, that you can bring in. And yeah, that was kind of a big story for us too. This is a funny thing. This is this panda, and this was from a recent story that people were doing. It's actually, this is the National Zoo, which in Washington, which live tweeted a panda being artificially inseminated, and then themselves used Storify to pull together all the tweets and create the narrative of what happened. So, you know, all these things are about curation. You know, every one of these little tidbits, you know, they're 140 characters, it's a photo. Amid all the other stuff online, our users found these things and pulled them out of that noise and added context, added meaning to it by simply curating it. And that's what we enable, and Storify is about curation. I was going to do a live demo, but because of Wi-Fi and stuff, it's probably safer to not do a live demo necessarily right here. But just quickly, I mean, I encourage you to go and try it out. This is what our dashboard looks like when you create stories. So just a quick screenshot here. On the right, we let you search all different sources like Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Flickr, and find elements from social networks that you can just drag and drop into a story. And we also have an iPad app for doing this. I was just going to show a quick video so you get kind of an idea what that looks like. Text in between each of the elements, and then you publish the story. And the stories are published on Storify, and they're also embeddable on other sites, which I'll talk more about. And really, I mean, I wanted to show this also to point out, I mean, again, we heard a lot about touch interfaces being the future and how that's the way, you know, obviously people expect every device to work nowadays, and we think this paradigm of curation is incredibly suited to touch. Because it is that you're taking things that are out there, you're remixing them. I mean, you probably saw when the iPad came out, there were a lot of iPad DJs that suddenly emerged, right? So that paradigm almost of being a DJ, of remixing content, is what describes curation as well. You know, putting things together in context, having a sense of your audience and knowing what they're looking for out of this, and creating something more meaningful from that. So that's kind of what we are aiming to do with that. Feedback loops. So the next thing I mentioned, this is a story. This is what they look like when we're published on Storify, and this is something from yesterday that Mashable did with Obama, you know, endorsing gay marriage. Obviously, that was a huge news story yesterday, massive headline today in the New York Times I saw, and they pulled together reaction. They pulled together Obama's own tweet, and the key thing that we let you do, which again, keeping in mind that the web is social. Well, if I'm pulling stuff from social media, that shouldn't just be a one-way channel. We also want to think about ways to push back to social media. So when you publish anything in Storify, you actually get the option to notify everybody that they've been quoted. And this is kind of a key thing. I mean, talking to a lot of people about, how do you encourage community participation, and obviously giving feedback is a key way. But it's even simpler than that. I mean, if you're a journalist, you talk to people, you interview them on the street, and take their quotes, take some video of them. Obviously, they're going to ask you, well, hey, when can I see this? When do I get to see my face in the paper? When do I get to see my quote? Like, that's kind of natural that everybody would see it. So it's sort of obvious. And what we do is let you actually automatically do that in a way. And we're really trying to think of ways to get that loop going and create like a viral loop around publishing. So it's not just one way we take things in, we publish it, and no, instead, like, let's create a loop where you take something from social media, you push it out, and you publish it, then you tell the people they've been in the story, then they can come back, they can comment, they can thank you, they can retweet it. I mean, I just, from yesterday, just randomly saw, these are people who are retweeting the fact that they were mentioned in others' stories. So, like, it works. Yeah, people want to show off to their friends that, hey, I got quoted somewhere. And they'll reply and say thanks. And this is something that we're really trying to do much more with. I mean, as we think about where to grow, we just recently, last week, launched a feature that every element in these stories can be commented on and shared. So on the top, you can actually comment just on this tweet from Obama yesterday about gay marriage, or you can share actually that tweet as a part of Storify to Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Google, LinkedIn, and by email. And really the idea is to, again, create more feedback loops around this. So, not only should a person know that their tweet is quoted in a story, they should also be able to find out, oh, people are talking about what I said in this story, and understand that, and then be able to comment back and keep a conversation going around what they said. 140 characters can be quite limiting, or, if they want to add more to what they said, if they want to respond to how the writer put it into context, like, we want to really encourage that in every way possible. So really, everything we do, we're trying to think of how to feed back into the social machine, as it were, into social networks. And this is just an example, too, of what things look like when they're embedded, when you share that quote on Facebook or on Pinterest. And again, we're trying to figure out what is the best way to do that. So this is, I mean, if you can wrap your head around this, this is a quote from Twitter that has been put into Storify, which has then been shared back to Facebook or Pinterest. So, I mean, we're basically touching every social network here, right? And okay, Facebook, as you know, like, photos get much more attention in the new Facebook timeline. So that's why we actually turn a quote into a photo and make it into this big thing. And Pinterest is all about photos. So again, the same kind of thing. And we're working on how we can make this look nicer and do more things with it. But really trying to think, like, how do we get out there into Pinterest and Facebook with things that are from Twitter, which, again, we want to be this curation layer on top of all these networks, but still feedback into all the different networks. So another key idea, back again to this story by Mashable, is that everything is embeddable. And really the thing here is, we don't want to be fighting the web. Like, the web is this amazing place where you can duplicate content and put it in many places, and you don't lose anything, right? Because it's digital. And you can embed objects in other websites and still maintain the attribution and links to the original source, and the original source can see where it's embedded. So that's what we actually do with stories. The stories themselves as objects are embeddable. And the idea is, why try to draw everybody to come back to your site? Like, that's great if you can get people to come back to your site, but what if you could actually get more traffic to your content by letting it flow freely across the entire web in a way that you still know where it's going, you have control, you could potentially place advertising into to monetize, etc. So this, on every story, we have this embed link at the top, and you can grab this embed code just like you take a YouTube video and embed it. And it's really kind of the way we think about it. Like, YouTube videos are embeddable everywhere, why aren't stories embeddable everywhere? And so, just an example of what this looks like. So this is yesterday, the Wall Street Journal, also using Storify for this same story. And yeah, they embedded the Storify story on their site. And oftentimes we see people do this, of their own stories. But in some cases, somebody sees a story and they really like it, and we have these stories that kind of go viral and are embedded on other sites. So this this kind of a funny story. This guy was live tweeting a couple having an argument in a Burger King. I don't know, this was like a fascinating thing, which is kind of very voyeuristic, and we almost felt like we didn't want to promote this story so much when we saw it, because we felt like, okay, that's a little odd. I mean, this guy happens to work at the Boston Globe, actually, but as a developer, not as a journalist, but he's a very active person on Twitter. And he tweeted this, and somebody else took his narrative of all these tweets and put them together in a story. Which, again, like if you were to follow on Twitter, like they'd be in the reverse order and they'd be interspersed with all this other stuff. Like you would lose the context of it. But, you know, somebody put it together and he told enough of a story just with his tweets in order that there almost didn't need to be anything added to this. Like that was great to just read this. I mean, it's kind of crazy. And, you know, this, we didn't even promote this at all, but this went crazy and got like hundreds of thousands of views. And like all these sites just found it and embedded it, like Gawker, the Daily Mail, you know, all the Next Web, all these people. I mean, so on every story, we keep these stats. So you can actually go on the side and click through and like see where things have been embedded all across the web. So again, we're you know, not trying to fight the way the web works. And actually for us, this has been an amazing asset because, you know, publishers to integrate into your content management systems, and that means you have to deal with the IT staff. That means you have to worry about, you know, if all these, you know, expensive CMS systems are compatible with different forms of feeds and all that. But if something is embeddable, it's just like putting a YouTube video into a blog post. So as long as you can embed something on a site, you can use Storify. And we've really had great adoption because of that, because, you know, some reporter at the Washington Post thinks it's cool and wants to use it for a story, and they can just stick it into the Washington Post CMS. They don't have to get, you know, all these IT staff to figure out if things are compatible and do testing, and it takes weeks and months because they have obviously other priorities. So it's really been a way for us to get in with a bunch of larger companies more quickly. So that's why, I mean, again, that's been really, really huge for us and a key asset. Another thing with having a story embeddable and thinking about how stories should work in the future on the web to create something more engaging for audiences is to have things be dynamic. So why, again, going back to that slide of the printing press, why are we still thinking about a story as this static thing that has to be, you know, sent to your editors by 6 p.m. because the presses roll at 9 and they need to do whatever, you know, pre-press and printing and mock-ups? I mean, that seems kind of ridiculous, right? Now the printing press never stops. It's instant. It's all the time. So why are we still creating content on the web that is like based on printing something once and then it's done? Why not have stories that are dynamic, that can be updated, that maybe last over days or weeks rather than just one day? Why be based on this 24-hour cycle when we don't need to anymore? So all our stories are dynamic. Like people can keep going back into them, updating them, adding to them, moving things around, deleting, reordering, and all that will be updated then where the stories are embedded. So that's another key reason why this embedding thing enables that. And really, a lot of the idea for that even just comes from thinking about the AP when I was a reporter. I mean, if you had a big story, you'd update it 20, 30 times throughout the day. You'd be changing the lead. You'd add in if the UN comments or the president of the country, or maybe things change and, you know, the death toll increases if it's some kind of disaster or whatever. So, like, the AP has been doing that, you know, for decades. So why aren't we doing that on the web where we now have this dynamic medium to tell stories? So this example, this was, again, just from yesterday, this hospital was live tweeting and live Pinteresting, if that's a verb, and live, you know, webcasting, essentially, doing brain surgery. This hospital had also done, like, a live open heart surgery, so now they took it up a notch and did brain surgery. And they were doing all this and then using Storify themselves to put it all together and kind of preserve this narrative. And I've like spared you from the far more gruesome photos that are in here, which I was, but they really, it's kind of amazing that they were actually pulling in, you know, tweets, photos, Pinterest, and they were using our Pinterest sharing to share it back to Pinterest from the story. I mean, they were doing this like in real time throughout the day. People were talking about it. They were responding. I mean, this was not something they just did once at the end of the story. They were actually using us as essentially like a live blogging platform. And that's kind of an interesting thing to do. Another way we've seen people use this, which gets into this whole dynamic thing, this is a story by the White House. So the White House, as you probably know, was pushing this this campaign about student loan rates and trying to get Congress to make sure to extend, to the regulations so that loan interest rates wouldn't double for student loans. And so they actually tried to get people to tell stories about that, right? And use this hashtag. And the White House obviously has a pretty large pulpit and is able to make these things into trending topics, across the United States. And what they were doing is then using Storify to pull this together into a story with sort of the best things people were saying, best quotes. Don't double my rate because I can't even afford to repay my student loans now. Education is a right for everyone, not just the wealthy. Pulling in an Instagram photo from when Obama was speaking at UNC and other comments and stuff. And they just keep building these stories throughout the day, throughout weeks, to kind of start a campaign. And I guess I'm showing things that aren't really like news stories per se, just to show where this is being used in other interesting ways. We have had people do similar things like this for news stories, where it could be as simple as, there's a storm today, send us your best photos, use this hashtag, we'll update and put the best into our story. The coach got fired at the university, what do you think about it? Send us your comments, we'll put the things together into a story. So you're actually kind of prompting people to create content on social media, which is great because then you're kind of spreading word, spreading a hashtag, but also still pulling together the best stuff and creating something on your own site. Which we've found, people have told us anecdotally, these types of stories get far more views and attention than just a regular story. Because again, if it's a blog post in the print, mentality of one time printing it, you read it, you're done, you have no reason to go back there again. But because you're telling people, no, we're going to keep updating, we're going to put the best stuff in there, we're going to, keep adding, evolving, deleting, changing, then readers have a reason to keep coming back and seeing what's there. So, not only does it have a benefit kind of on the production side to keep these things going, it really creates more engaging content. And I think we've seen a lot of people, talk about live blogging more and more as this new format. I almost think it's like making the web into TV effectively, right? Like something you want to watch, but better than TV, you can engage and you can directly comment on this and keep the conversation going. So those are kind of the four big things I wanted to touch on. Again, curation, thinking about how to find the best out of all this huge social media noise that's out there. And when you do that, always giving feedback back to the sources in any way, like thinking how we can, propel that and drive that virality in a way that makes sense. Making things embeddable, so letting things easily spread everywhere and benefiting from that, not just being afraid because somebody's copying and pasting your stuff, but actually being able to do it in a way that you benefit to, and then making things dynamic and updating and keeping active online. So with that, thank you very much for listening. I'd be happy to take your question.
Thank you, Burt. Does anybody have any questions here?
Very short question. What's your business model?
So right now we are venture backed. We are not charging for anything. It's a free service. We're talking about monetization. The ideas we're thinking about are essentially like pro plans, working with publishers and brands to figure out what features they might want that go beyond what a regular person would use. And then also advertising. We think there could be a huge potential in a social ad that could be embedded into a story that would travel with the story wherever it goes and be contextually related to the story and also be shareable and an object that can be spread further on its own, which is sort of this holy grail that people are looking for right now, the social ad. So we think this could be a great platform for that.
Great. So my question is around rights and whether or not you've had any ruffled feathers in terms of pulling things where people didn't have the rights to put something up and then it gets embedded somewhere and you've got to pull it. How do you deal with that?
Right. We have never pulled anything out of a story because of a rights issue. We're only using all the public APIs for all these services, and we don't actually save the photo or the video or whatever. It's only embedded from the other side into our story, which is then embedded elsewhere. So we are just linking to all these different objects. We aren't actually reposting the object. Other social networks, a certain one which name starts with pin, anyway, they actually make copies of every photo that are on their site. We don't do that.
Interesting. Any other questions? I guess we're all set. Burt, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.